Day 339 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And as always, we'll head over to those Russian military losses as we continue to take a bit of a peek at the exhaustion of those Russian forces. And currently, Russia is sitting on 125,510 Russian military personnel losses there, which represents an additional 500 or so in the past 24 hours. Then a quick look at the hardware losses, so 7 tanks, 4 APVs, 8 artillery. And you know, I rarely ever mention the vehicles and fuel tanks, but those losses are often quite high, putting a real ongoing hamper on Russian supply and logistics ultimately. Then we'll move back across to the map and we'll start out in Moscow today, capital of Russia, where a warehouse in Moscow has somehow been set alight. And there's no shortage of these occurrences even in the dead of winter, the freezing cold Russian winter. Then further south, still in Russia, so a KAMAZ truck carrying 6 Russian mobilized soldiers inside of it overturned near Belgorod with what amounted to some serious injuries for those mobilized Russian soldiers as part of that incident. Then we'll move back to the Ukrainian side of things for the map today, and we'll start out again in the Donbass. We'll take a look specifically up the top there, or central top, Soledar. So Ukrainian artillerists are quite active in this region at the moment. For instance, just today they hit and destroyed several Russian units who attempted to cross the Bakhmutovka River near Krasnopopalivka. Oh, sorry, that's Poplivka. So right here in this region there, you can see the river location. And this is where I occasionally mention that rivers will certainly do something to achieve slowing down the Russian forces as they attempt to advance, and in some instances, stop them altogether. Then just south of here, heavy fighting continues in the direction of Krasnohora and also Blahodatne. Right there, so these two settlements right next to each other. And this heavy fighting has continued ever since the capture of Soledar by the Russian forces, a couple of weeks ago really now. And even so, it never stopped the Russian forces from launching constant frontal attacks in these two towns. Then we'll move down a little bit further on the map. So Russian forces continue frontal assaults towards the town of Ivaniska. So here it is right there. In fact, just for a bit of context, zoom out there. So the Russian forces have made progress towards the town, and heavy fighting continues on the connecting roads south of the town. Now, Ivaniski is bit of a key Bakhmut supply route for the AFU for the longest time, as you can see there, which needs to be maintained. And as such, we've got a lot of AFU forces stationed around this entire region who are conducting operations to stabilize the situation. Just yesterday, I spoke about the salient measures that Russia has been taking here to really protrude and push out. They have made no gains there since yesterday. As expected, it's very hard to maintain this sort of momentum for really any army. Then we'll move a further bit south there in the Donbass. So we'll take a look at Volodar. Here we go. So Volodar, once again, Russia fails to take the location and thus ends up resorting to things like thermobaric weapons. Now, these are somewhat similar to incendiary munitions, but not exactly the same, and they've been firing these in the outskirts of the town. And these types of weapons are of questionable legality to use in a war zone due to their use of a combination of fuel and an oxidizer to create a powerful fiery explosion. And when used in a residential location, legal or not, the international community would certainly make that a war crime. But Volodar still holds, and both sides, in fact, are really digging their heels in each side here. Then we'll move across a little bit more westerly today. So in Zaporizhia, I have to zoom out to zoom back in. And here we go. So Orikhiv, right there. So Russian bloggers and military personnel alike on the Russian side have continued to claim a lot of major victories, land-based victories and land gains taken right in this spot here, which is rather quite false and thus appears to be designed for a sort of a internal Russian propaganda of sorts to imply that Russian forces are sustaining plenty of momentum after that Solidar take from a couple of weeks ago, for instance, there. Then more of a news piece for this region, but the Ukrainian Defense Council Secretary Danilov has warned that Russia is looking to perform a significant new wave of offensives on the front lines, and particularly here in Zaporizhia. And to do this on about the 24th of February, he said as well. And he also said that as current, Russia is testing Ukraine's defense capabilities in the region, which does seem to be true with the recent hits to the left and right, east and west here. And I do realize this is war, but it is still a little bit inhumane in a way, where Russia probes through use of their manpower, inevitably finding out that it doesn't work. Therefore, their manpower is just lost, liquidated in the process. Then right next door in the Kherson Oblast, so the Ukrainian army was striking the Russian army's military positions in Skidovsk, right there, with HIMARS missiles. And you might remember this location used to get daily HIMARS attention. So in this case, perhaps Ukraine received some intelligence or updated intelligence to suggest that the Russian forces redeployed some units to this location, thus causing Ukraine to perform some of those HIMARS strikes and reminding Russia in the process why it left in the first place. Then next up, firstly, I don't show you this very often, but it would be a good idea to take a peek at the pathogen map in this region. Now, as you can see, this is a very rough guide of Russian deployments or forces throughout the whole region, throughout the whole of Ukraine, really, and very aptly named the pathogen overlay. As the name is likening the invading Russian forces to a bacterium, virus, or other invading microorganism. And of particular note is the lesser accumulation points of Russian forces in the Kherson Oblast, also the Crimean Peninsula, and even just a tad smidge bit of Zaporizhia's west side as well. So the lower concentrations of Russian forces is pretty endemic of the fact that Russia has trouble spreading its forces out too far away from its own legitimate borders. In other words, the further out they get, the more difficult it is for them to sustain offensive operations, even defensive operations for that matter. Resources stretched thin. Then we'll move across to some news for the day there. So let's see, here we go. Now, so in a bit of an ad hoc tank list here, you'll see a bit of a listing of all the upcoming tanks, also known as MBTs, which just stands for main battle tanks. And if you look closely, it looks a little like Morocco is putting most other countries to shame. Of course, they're only providing the old Soviet T-72s as yet, but Morocco also have Abrams tanks. Literally hundreds of them, maybe 200 or so M1 Abrams, and about 150 M2 Abrams tanks. So once training is completed by the Ukrainian armed forces for the Abrams tanks, Ukraine is very likely to receive at least a handful of the Abrams from Morocco as well. And then taking a look at Spain, now a country with one of the largest fleets of leopard tanks in Europe, about 350 in all, actually found they found about 53 mothballed leopards for cleaning up, currently stationed or stored somewhere in the north of Africa from memory there, and later down the line are likely to send the entirety of these ones here too. So this is a bit of an asterisk one, but it's likely to send all of those. Then in some other news, really, so Putin has convened a meeting with the Russian Security Council about the importance of the continental shelf in the Arctic Ocean. So for a little bit of context here, the continental shelf in the Arctic Ocean has a lot of melting sea ice, allowing for shipping routes and navigation to occur, but most importantly, it has natural resources. Lots and lots of natural resources. We're talking gas and oil. And so 6 or 7 countries lay claim to the region. But all I can think about this news is, Russia, aren't you a little busy right now to be making territorial claims elsewhere on the globe? And since it has to be a bit of a quick one today, so a couple of funnies to round it off. So the first one is both funny and bizarre. So first, Abrams tank near Bakhmut. Excuse the laughing. So these are the sorts of things that seem to be going around the Russian social media circles at the moment. And just for the record, of course, Ukraine hasn't even received any US Abrams tanks as yet. And needless to say, it's not 120 degrees Fahrenheit, Iraqi desert summer day weather in Bakhmut right now either. Not now, probably not ever. It's an old Iraq photo. But my only really highest hope with all of this was that military spokesperson and absolute life of the party, Igor Konashenkov of Russia, was to be the first to announce this. I had really hoped for that, for this type of Abrams victory for Russia. But worry not, there's still a good chance that Igor will get his moment to announce this sooner or later as well. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit the like button, and I do certainly hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.